Hey, welcome back, and we've got a great interview set up for you today. I'd like to introduce you guys to Stephen Wright, and he has been in suicide prevention for 5 years, interventions for 3 years, and he's even doing postventions for support for the last 2 years, helping people who have survived suicide in their family or friends or loved ones. He helps people, like he's created support groups, all kinds of things to help people. I don't know very many people with a heart bigger than Stephen's. He's also a former committee of the inaugural Veterans Education Program Committee from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And he's also an Army vet of 15 years, to include a tour in Afghanistan in 2013. Welcome, Stephen.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be here, Kevin. I think what you're doing is great.
Yeah, thanks. So, obviously here at the Humility Quest, we like to talk to people who have a lot of experience with mental fitness challenges, because mental fitness goes a long ways, right? Like there's the suicide prevention stuff, right? And the intervention stuff, which obviously you've got a lot of experience with, all the way to way before anybody's even thinking about suicide, where depression just starts setting in, right? We try to cover that whole gamut a little bit. And, your experience, I remember like the first day that I met you and just hearing about your experience where you were training the people who answer the calls on the 988 lines, right? Like, that's got to be pretty intense stuff. Like, I can't even imagine.
Some of the stuff I've done certainly is not easy, but, years of therapy for myself, years of mental health assistance and help for myself kind of got me to a place where I'm okay doing that kind of stuff, even for prolonged periods of time, because I know some certain things to, take care of myself and make sure I'm okay, because you can't help people if you need help.
I got a good feeling we're gonna go through some of those things before we get to the end of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you get started in like training in suicide prevention and intervention and all these things?
So honestly, that goes back years. I was stationed with the Army out in Georgia. One of my very good friends, in fact, I would argue probably my best friend from college, Adam, I found out through one of our other good mutual buddies that we were all in ROTC together with, that Adam had killed himself. And that really laid heavy on me. And it kind of caused me to go into the, maybe not spiral, but it certainly caused me to go down the rabbit hole of, hey, he's not the first and only one. A couple friends from college, a lot of service members that I served with, a couple honor guards that I was on honor guard details with had all killed themselves. And it just kind of led me to asking a lot of questions and genuine curiosity, like, hey, how can we help stop this? And that's where I got involved with this walk called Out of the Darkness. It's a community walk that the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention puts on all across the nation. The one that I went to had a bunch of service members from the Little Rock, Arkansas area, and we all went together and we all got to hold posters of our friends or family members, whoever we wanted. It was just a short little walk. I mean, not like a 2 mile or a 5K or anything, maybe a mile and a half, where we just all came together and, celebrated the lives of our loved ones. And that's what kind of got me plugged in, I guess, with the prevention stuff. Main focus of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, obviously, is those prevention efforts. And so I kind of got looped in with all of them and started participating, going to their training, and eventually found myself being the trainer for a lot of that prevention stuff.
Yeah. And so how much training did you have to go through? Like, how hard was it to kind of get involved? And like you said, you had lost a few people in your life. So there was obviously some emotional motivation to get involved as well.
So in terms of getting involved, it was not very hard at all. In terms of becoming a trainer for some of their prevention programs, that was a little more difficult. I don't know that there's necessarily a 100% rhyme or reason to it, but they don't let just anybody become a trainer. Obviously, you have to go to the Train the Trainer schools, and for each class, mind you, these classes are 30 minutes to 2 hours long, but for each class that you're able to train, there's a day or a 2-day training process for facilitators, as they call them. So I went to a couple of those. One of the primary things they want to do is they want to make sure that you're mentally capable enough putting that class on, and you yourself not having necessarily flashbacks or an extreme emotional draw to where you become incapable of being the facilitator. Because once you are facilitating these classes, you're more than likely going to get bombarded with a lot of questions that there's not a script for. You might have some people that become extremely emotional, and that emotional chart ranges, 360 degrees. It could be happy, sad, angry, and they could just completely lose it, ballistic, belligerent, all because of something either you say or a feeling that they, all of a sudden now start to have because of the training. So you have to learn a lot of intricate ways of dealing with certain people based on certain emotions or certain things that are said or not said. So it's not just very difficult, but AFSP certainly wants to make sure that you're capable and competent before you're out there dealing with the public, teaching them this stuff, and you may encounter an issue like that.
I think it takes a very special person to do something like that. From an emotional intelligence standpoint, just the emotional energy that goes into doing training like that or having a call like that, I don't think I could do it. I would be like, I'd have zero energy by the end of the day. I probably wouldn't even be able to make it to my bed.
One of the more important things, I guess, people could take away from this conversation in terms of suicide prevention. I might have quite a bit of training. No, I don't have a degree or anything. I've been doing this a pretty long time. I've attended several courses, but I've actually applied a lot of this work in real life situations, both as just an interventionist and as the guy that everybody just knows to go to for suicide, and also as a law enforcement officer. But AFSP has this little slogan, and it's also a little training class. It's called Talk Saves Lives. Literally, just that statement alone is probably the biggest takeaway a lot of people could take and kind of ingest. If you know anybody that is or was or may be having thoughts of suicide or suicidal ideations, simply talking to them can really quell a lot of it, because so many people just need that opportunity to speak where they're not judged. So if you're able to just say a few things to them, hey, how's your day going? Let's talk. And it doesn't even specifically have to be about that per se. Just keeping them engaged in conversation can take their mind off of the crisis point or the imminent crisis point that they may be coming up on. So yeah, just talking to people helps tremendously.
So you don't necessarily even need to get into all the emotional talks or going through the things, because I think most people, when they start talking to somebody else, and especially if they start bringing up problems, our immediate reaction is go into problem solving mode. Oh, you're having a problem with this? Oh, just XYZ, insert an answer, right? It's almost like we're AI. We can't help but give answers to your problems, right? But like you said, just talking to them about anything, just hey, how's it going? What's your favorite show or whatever. It doesn't have to be about this big emotional problem that they're having. But if that does come up, then the other thing you said was just being there just to listen without judgment. I think you said, I think that's exactly what you said.
Honestly, during true interventions that I've done, most of the time you are listening. You'll of course maybe ask a couple questions to solicit answers, but they're going to be open-ended questions. You don't ask them a yes or a no question. If somebody were to come and say, I have nothing to live for, coming back and saying, oh, the Bible says this, or the Quran, or whatever you believe in says this, or, oh, what about your kids? Well, in their mind, maybe it's one of those suggestions you just gave that's causing them to have these suicidal thoughts or ideations. So just, have you really thought about everything like that? What makes you want to do this? Are you sure they think this way? Are you sure you're viewed that way? Are you sure this is going to happen? Well, do we have a plan for just very open-ended, nothing that's going to be yes or no per se. Just kind of get their brain thinking, because when they're in an actual crisis point, they don't hear 95% of what you're saying anyways. They don't. They just need to talk a lot. And if they trust you enough to simply open up to you and talk, just be there to solicit more answers from them. Just be there to keep the conversation going, because the longer it goes, the more and more they come away from that crisis point. Their vision and their audible senses go from being more pinpoint and laser focused to more peripheral. They can actually take things in, and things can actually make sense to them. Because a lot of times when they're just talking, frankly rambling, they don't really know what they're saying. It's just their mental state, their crisis point that they're in. They just need to talk and get things off. So you're right. Just coming on like, hey, here's the answer to X, Y, and Z. That's not what they need. What they need is somebody that can simply just be a good ear and just listen and continue to listen, maybe provoking a couple answers from them or soliciting some answers from them just to keep them more and more prolonged from that crisis point.
I can definitely think of times in my life where, even recently, where I was having interpersonal issues. And so I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and he just kind of let me vent, right? He just kind of let me get it off my chest. And the next day, I felt so much better. I understood that the things that I was talking about weren't nearly as bad as I had been making them in my mind. But just being able to say it out loud was really all it took for me to be able to see it in a different way. Do you have a list or something of advice that you give to people who may be in a circumstance like that where they would want to talk to somebody who they think might be considering suicide?
I mean, honestly, my only recommendation would be is know your resources that you have available to you and know the resources that you have available to them. And you don't have to do this huge in-depth thing, right? If you have somebody that you think, say for instance, your friend, and you think they might be having suicidal thoughts, or they're, displaying some risky behavior, or some of the things that we've, for the most part as veterans, a long time been trained on, hey, that's suicidal behavior. Maybe just engage that person in conversation with just a real quick, fresh up of what's available to you and them as options for help. One of the things a lot of people don't know is 988. I am a huge proponent of 988. I love 988. They save lives. I think they're great. But 988 is not just for people that are in that crisis themselves. Anybody can call 988 and ask these call takers, hey, I've got a buddy of mine that is, I think, having suicidal thoughts or ideations. Can you just, tell me some things maybe I could say to him? Could you maybe give me a list of some things that you think would be good resources for him? And of course, always, 988 is a fantastic resource as well. If we're talking to somebody that completely just does not want to engage somebody because they're too afraid of that conversation, I would again simply remind them, talk saves lives. Just talk to them. It doesn't have to be about that particular thing whatsoever. They're not trained interventionists. As a trained interventionist, we have pretty much an obligation to ask very specific questions with very specific wording to solicit very specific answers. But a lot of times that's not really required. Simply, hey man, how are you doing today? Can literally change somebody's life. Simply reaching out and telling somebody you matter. I literally got it tattooed on my arm. Changed their lives completely.
So you've been in the Army, you've been a police officer, you've been in the National Guard, right? You've done lots of things, right? There's a lot of your life that is very in a career. There's a lot of obligations, right? There's things that you kind of have to do. But the work that you're doing in setting up the suicide survivor, groups and helping people with the interventions and things like that, all of that, from what I understand, is mostly just voluntary, right? It's kind of stuff that makes you come alive. You do it because you want to. It's not because there's some obligation to do it. And so when it comes to when you first got started doing this stuff, there was probably some emotional change somewhere where you went from, okay, here's what I'm doing for a living, and I am now going to take this extra time and start putting it towards helping this cause, right? Suicide prevention. Would you be willing to tell me a little bit about what that felt like? Did you feel like you had to give yourself permission, or what happened when you were you know what, I'm going to take this time and do it?
Wow, that's a really good question. I don't know when I felt, I guess you could say, compelled or pulled to this. I know as a police officer, I experienced those types of situations regularly. I won't say daily, but it was certainly regularly. In the military, we had a lot of this force training, and I think that may have been part of it. I got absolutely sick and tired of this mandatory quarterly suicide prevention training. And in my mind, I was like, there has to be a better way. It's the same video presentation. It's the exact same slide deck on PowerPoint. It's the exact same presenter or not, because a lot of times they'd come in, set up the projector, hit play, and then they'd be gone even. Like, there has to be a better way to learn about suicide prevention and teach suicide prevention that doesn't make me want to myself have really bad thoughts. So I think that's probably, so maybe 2019-ish is when I really got involved with or concerned with how the Army, frankly, because I didn't know how the other branches did their training, was conducting suicide prevention training. I was like, there has to be a better way for this. And I realized that a lot of soldiers have a lot of contacts that are veterans. And it's not just service members that were, killing themselves. It was veterans also. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're still all on the same team. I might not have to show up to drill, or I might not have, 6 a.m. PT anymore. But I still know several people that do. So that being said, I was like, there's got to be a way to try to integrate this or implement this into that community so that at least they know that there's options and there's other resources than the mandatory make you want to do bad things to yourself training that they force us all to take quarterly. And so I think that's honestly what kind of spurred my decision to really get involved, is because I myself was tired of the training. It was terrible. I never learned anything from it. I honestly couldn't, I don't know that if I could regurgitate anything I ever learned in any of the 150 mandatory suicide prevention classes I went to. But I can very much remember the first time I ever went to Talk Saves Lives. The first time I went to a community walk. I can very much remember the first time I went to an intervention class. And all of that really resonated with me because it hits you on a very personal level instead of this institutional level. Like, oh, I'm learning this because the Army tells me I have to learn this. Now you get to learn this because you want to learn this, or it's something that's interesting to you.
Yeah. There's all kinds of mandatory classes that we went through, and none of them were a good time for sure. But it's it's interesting, right? Because I go through that class and I was just like, okay, another mandatory class. All right. Somebody wake me up. All right. Whatever. Like for you, you were like, there's got to be a better way. There was something already tugging at you inside, which is pretty awesome. So when you did go to walk and then you went to your first training class, were there any thoughts of I don't have time for this? Were there any thoughts of I've just got more important things to do, or I've got other obligations that I got to take care of?
Yeah, for me, no. And honestly, I would say for anybody that was there, I don't think that was the case whatsoever for a single one of them. And that's maybe not said, obviously, from places like their own agency, but you can kind of read the room and you can tell who's there because they're told to be there, like they're voluntold, or who's there because they care, or they're at least intrigued, interested by it. And I have yet to this day, even still, seen anybody that felt like it was a drag or they had better things to do. I have had some that maybe came a little too soon. For example, I was teaching an intervention class, nothing but police officers and jailers. And I had one of the jailers who had lost a very good friend of theirs, a fellow deputy, who had killed himself maybe 2 weeks prior to the class. And frankly, we do not allow those individuals to come to class because it is so emotionally pulling and it is so close to when the incident occurred.
It's still fresh.
Very fresh, very fresh. So we had to deal with that individual. We ended up letting her stay, but it did cause us to have to take a step away from training to kind of deal with her and whatnot. So I've had some people that maybe shouldn't have been there simply because it was a little too close to home too soon, but I've never seen anybody show up at any of these trainings that didn't want to be there.
No, that's awesome. So it sounds like when you knew, right? And you started going and there was no hesitation. You were just ready to go.
I would say the one thing that I had a little hesitation towards, I decided I wanted to be an intervention instructor. And that's a very long class. I say it's a long class. For 6 days, it is nothing but suicide intervention and suicide all day, every day, the entire time you're there. And I knew that was, for me, going to be very mentally difficult because I had just recently gone through my own issues where I was seeking a lot of my own therapy. I had hit burnout from doing all the suicide prevention stuff and dealing with all the people with all their problems. And I didn't really know how to address mine. Very openly talked to my therapist about it. I was like, hey, I've wanted to do this. I don't know that I'm ready for it right now, but I've got this class opportunity that comes up very seldom. I don't know how I feel about it. And honestly, through therapy, we kind of worked out a whole lot of stuff. And even my therapist was like, yeah, I think you're, fine to go to this now. But that was the only hesitation I really had. And even after I was done with therapy and I was about to go to this class, I still had this thought in my head like, oh, this is going to be terrible. This is really going to be mentally draining on me. So I took 3 weeks to do absolutely nothing except drive to this class all the way in Oregon from Arkansas and just get my mind right. So I was camping at different national parks, just having find myself time or dude time, however you want to classify it, just to literally get my mind right in preparation for this. And then I also planned on the back end another week to a week and a half to get back home so I could get my mind right for being, reintegrated back into society, I guess you could say, because that's a very, very, very deep class. But once I made it to the class, met some fantastic classmates that were going through the training with me, and everything was just fine. There was some emotional struggle throughout, but I would say, thanks to the resiliency, I personally, biasedly believe I have myself, was able to make it through it no problem.
When it comes to resilience and different things that we do, the reason that we're doing them, I think, makes a big difference, right? If you're doing something out of obligation, then, that's one thing. But when you had 100% agency and it's something that you chose to do, it's a very different thing, right? For me, the adventures and stuff that I'm doing are hard. For example, the other day I did a very long run uphill. I hate running. Anybody who knows me from Army days or anything like that, they know running was the thing that I hated to do the most, right? I'll do push-ups all day long, but don't make me run, right? But just the other day, I took this super long run that was over 1,000 feet elevation gain, and it just feels different because I chose it. It's because the end of what I'm trying to accomplish is more important. If I had to do that for work, that'd be a completely different thing. When you choose to, all right, this is where I'm going and this is how I want to spend the time that I've got, is to go and help people in this type of situation, then I think your levels of resilience are, you can't really even measure them.
Yeah, I would have to agree completely. There's honestly not a whole lot of times in my life where I said, I think running's going to be a great idea, but I will concur when it was on my own accord and I made that decision, it was much more enjoyable than mandatory formation for a company run for, 2 miles, or if you made them mad 5 miles, that was never fun. I would certainly say there's an aspect to it where resiliency kicks in, at least if it's of your own cognition and your own decision to participate in something like that.
Right. So interestingly, I'll just kind of tell you what I was kind of looking for in the way that I was asking that question. When I started doing adventures, the very first adventure that I went out to go do was scuba diving, right? I went out and got my scuba certification. I lived in the middle of Phoenix, Arizona. So I lived in the middle of a desert, right? And, but it was something that I've always wanted to do, but I never gave myself any permission to do it because I felt like it was from an income standpoint. I wasn't at a place where I wanted to be for my family. And so I just felt this tremendous amount of guilt doing anything and spending money on myself as opposed to spending my extra time figuring out a way to make more revenue, right? Start a side business, do whatever, right? So that first step for me, facing my family and saying, hey, I'm going to go get my scuba certification. And I, basically asked them for permission, was a really difficult thing. And without help from another friend of mine, the idea to even do it would have never come into my realm of reality. And so, I wasn't sure if there was anything like that for you, something that was blocking you, something that was in your way of here's my obligations, here's what I do, here's how I provide for my living, for my livelihood, and then there's this other thing that I want to do. Was there any roadblocks for you at all?
At the time, in terms of roadblocks, yeah, there were several. Hindsight's always 2020. Looking back, I think I was very zealous, maybe overzealous in my approach. I didn't necessarily have like the financial constraints of a family per se. I was a federal employee making pretty decent money. I got to frankly make my own schedule. I didn't take into account a whole lot of anything other than that. So I think maybe initially I did make some hasty decisions to kind of get involved with some of this. But in terms of like a roadblock, I don't really think there was roadblocks for me at the time. But I would like to caveat and kind of add to that. What you're talking about is a very misunderstood, under-discussed topic called self-care. That was something I learned a little late in the game that frankly was a lot of the reason why I had to talk to my therapist before I went to the instructor training for suicide intervention. I got so stuck on the day-to-day of this and this and this, and I didn't do anything for myself. After that, I guess maybe similarly to you, but under different circumstances, I myself started scuba diving. I'd wanted to do it for a really long time and just hadn't. And it's because I continued to give all of myself away to everything except myself. And as somebody who is a father or somebody who's a businessman, somebody who's a first responder, mental health responder, to anybody for any reason, frankly, for this matter, self-care is probably one of the most important aspects that we don't really utilize or understand or talk about enough. If we're giving 100% of ourselves away all of the time, that means the only time we're really getting to ourselves, if we get any, is sleep. And I had a horrible sleep hygiene, horrible sleep schedule. So I think it is imperative for people that want to get involved in suicide prevention or intervention, especially for mental health for any reason whatsoever, and simply just for anybody for that matter, to really understand how important self-care is. You have to take time for yourself or else you will hit burnout. You will have your own problems if you don't talk about them or do things to alleviate the stress in your life. And that's simply even if you're just a dad with a family who's got a 9-to-5 at Sears. You need to have things that you consider self-care that benefit you so you can continue to benefit everybody else.
And it's a tough subject too. There's so many, I guess, misnomers around self-care or self-love. Like you'll see, I guess, memes where people have like a gallon of ice cream and a spoon and they're like, oh, self-care. And they're like,
not really. Maybe, if you never eat ice cream and this is just like your one cheat day for, whatever. But I mean, there's far more healthier options. Getting outdoors, recreation, that's good self-care. Reading a book. Actually, for some people, believe it or not, just simply conducting regular hygiene is a good opportunity to simply insert just self-care time. Because there's so many people, and a lot of people don't talk about it, that are so busy with the hustle and bustle of their life or whatever they have going on, that hygiene starts to fall to the wayside. And that, frankly, is a really good sign that their mental health is also going in the trash can as well. So anything you can do to positively impact your very own life, not necessarily everybody else's, will subsequently impact everybody else's in a positive way.
Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming out for this conversation. Like, there was things that came out that I wasn't expecting, and like I said, it was just good to hear a lot of this stuff from somebody with your kind of experience. So I really appreciate you coming out.
I appreciate you having me on, Kevin. Anytime, seriously, you want to talk to me, or if any of your listeners have any additional questions, feel free to route them right over to me. I don't mind answering any questions anybody might have or talking to somebody that may need to talk about some stuff. So that's truly my passion. That's truly what I believe in. I obviously very biasedly think that's truly who I am as a person. So yeah, anything I can do to help, especially for you, good sir.
Thanks. Yeah. Is there an easy way for people to find you, like like Instagram or Facebook or anything?
So LinkedIn is a pretty good way for people to reach out to me if they need to. I don't know my exact LinkedIn here we go.
Yeah, I can put that in the.
Yeah, if you want to throw my LinkedIn in there, my email address is fine as well. I certainly don't mind however they need to reach out to me. I would ask if you throw my number out there, if they do need me, for them to not call me unless it's an absolute emergency. Texting is far easier and can certainly keep tabs on who I've replied to and who I haven't versus missed phone calls.
I'll keep it to LinkedIn. I won't put your phone number or email out there. I mean, I may not have very many followers now, but yeah, you never know. You never know what happens in the future.
Oh, well, I'm sure you're going to get plenty of followers, especially with something like this.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks again, Stephen. We'll see you later.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, Kevin.